Babe.
What day is it?
Bobblehead day.
Shit.
I have a gift for you. A completely remembered gift.
Do you?
Don't shoot me in the ass when I go in there.
Mm-hmm.
We done?
Do you know how much this dress costs?
Oh, come on. That better not have been the Margot.
Hey, come here. Oh. Are you gonna call next time?
Yes.
Being honest, I hate you.
Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump.com. Welcome to our new tutorial on digital wall hits. So today we're going to explore a couple shots. The first one here, we'll see Amber firing at a wall. And in the second shot, we'll see Eric running down the wall, trying to avoid being hit by the bullets that Amber's firing. Now, to make these shots come alive, we're going to need to see the bullet impact into the wall, the debris flying out, and just all of the general mayhem. And I thought it would be fun to create some custom assets for this. So the first thing we're going to need to do is grab a couple stills. So we'll come over here and we'll save a frame, and we'll save it as a TIFF, and I'm going to put this into my source images for both shot 11 and 12. Just want to make sure our best settings so it's full res. Go into the right folder and another TIFF, and we'll hit render. There we go. Now save that, and let's jump over to Maya for a bit. This is where the majority of what we're going to do is going to take place. So the first thing I want to do is create a new camera. And I'm going to go down to my environment. I'm going to create an image plane, and I'm going to drop in shot 15. Now when I look through my camera, we've got our frame sitting here. And let's just go to RGB on the display mode, and I only want to see it through the camera view, so when I hit my orthographics, I won't have that image in them. So I need to get this camera aligned, and more or less I can kind of line up the ground plane just by eye. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is get a rough piece of geometry in here for the scale. And the scale is going to be important because we're going to deal with a lot of dynamics, and we're going to have particle systems driving debris, we're going to have a particle system driving a fume effect, smoke puff, and we want to make sure that that's all in relative scale. So I'm going to come into my orthographic view here, and I'm going to create a cube. and I'll just draw it out roughly right now. And I'm going to go with 24.4 for the width and the height. And I'm going to go with a depth of maybe 5. That's probably plenty thick. Actually, let's drop that down to like 2. And what this is going to give us is an approximate geometry scale for our wall. And we can see we need to zoom out that camera quite a bit to get this to fit properly. I'm going to find out where about the top of it is. It should be just beyond the view of the camera. And there we go. And that looks like it's lining up pretty well. So I think we've got a pretty good approximate angle here for our wall. And let's go ahead and name this the wall geo. Okay, so now I need to set up a particle emitter. So I'm going to come over to my dynamics menu and I'm going to go to particles and create emitter. And I'll call this one emitter large debris. And I'm going to change it from an omni to a volume. And I'm going to change it from a cube to a sphere. And what else do I need to do here? I think I'm going to need to move it up and move it back to about where the wall is here. And move it up to about the area Amber is going to be shooting at. Let's just get that moved over. And I'm not terribly concerned about placement just yet. I think when we render, we're going to keep this generally pretty centered. But I just want to make sure that it's in about the right place. And while I'm here, let me create another piece of geometry here for the floor. And I'm just going to grab a plane and just draw a big old plane on the floor. And that should cover us there. Okay, and we'll just call this the floor geo. There we go. Okay, so let's zoom into our emitter here. And I'm going to change its direction from X to Z. And I'm going to change its speed random to 5. I will go away from center at about 10 and the directional speed of about 10. If I back up and play through, that is at least moving in the correct direction. All right, so we're on our way. Now the original shot is only 15 frames, but I'm gonna go ahead and make this longer because I want to make a general element that I can use for both shots. So for right now, we'll just say 72, and we'll see where that's gonna get us. But this emitter is pretty big, so I'm gonna come down, maybe go about 0.2 on everything. And let me go ahead and play it again. That's looking okay. I think the direction of everything's looking good. So let's go ahead and start adding some gravity to this so we can have a better idea of what we're really dealing with. Go ahead, add gravity, and while we're here, let's bring up our outliner. And we want to there we go, see everything. So gravity field is set to 9.8, -1 direction, no attenuation. That's perfect. So let me click on my particles here so we can keep them highlighted. That looks okay. But the first thing I want to do is come in and set some keyframe. Set a keyframe here on my particles per second. And I'm going to go something pretty high, like maybe 500. Set a key. Come out about 5 frames. Set the key. Go forward a frame. Drop them off to nothing. So we want a big burst. Let's see how that looks. Not bad. I think they are falling probably a little slow. Let me go ahead and do a play blast on those particles. Check in my settings, and we'll hit play blast. It's always best to do a play blast when you're really trying to figure out the speed of something, because the timeline and the viewport display is just never going to give it to you. Overall, that's not too bad. I think I'd like them to fall a little faster, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to double the gravity, and I'm also going to add a turbulence field. So I just want them to have a very chaotic movement. I'm going to come to my fields, I'm going to add a turbulence field, and I'm going to try to go up the magnitude, turn off the attenuation, and we may play with that max distance. Let's just see where we're at right now. That's looking better. Let's do another play blast, see what's going on. I think they're still going a little slow to the ground, so I'm going to up my gravity again, and we'll run another play blast here. And all these play blasts are going to pay off because we're going to have to do some more of these. Now, the speed of them falling is good, but they've lost a lot of that chaotic movement. So I'm going to up my turbulence again, and we'll take another play blast. Yep, so we've got a little bit of craziness happening here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to play with that max distance because I want them to initially get that turbulence, but then I want them to just fall. That's looking more like it. Okay, let me try play blast again. And I think one thing I don't like is that the particles are coming out over a longer span than I'd like. This needs to be a quick burst. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to move them over. Let's see. Maybe over 3 frames instead of 5. That would work better, I think. That at 0, and we'll go ahead and double the amount of particles coming out. So that way it'll make up for them being on less. There we go. That feels more like a burst that I'm looking for. So the next thing we need to do is make some debris for this thing to generate. So I'm going to save my scene here, and I'm going to call this one shot 11-12 wall hit. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to create a polygon sphere. It should be fairly small. And I'm going to go ahead and grab it. I'm going to just zero out everything for the moment. And then I'm going to come over here to my edit, delete by type, and I'm going to delete its history. And then I'm going to freeze its transformations. And that's an important step for what we're going to do next, which is to come over here to our effects, and we're going to create a shatter. We're going to do a solid shatter, and maybe say 25 shards. And the edge jagginess will go maybe 0.25, and we'll hit create. Okay, so now we've got our original sphere, which we can delete, and now we've got all these little fun pieces. And if I grab the whole thing and I bring it up for a moment, we can see that the shards are going to be bigger than what we want. So I'm going to drop them back down. I'm going to take my shards all together, and I'm going to scale them down to maybe 0.2. Just want tiny little pieces. Let's just bring them back up for a second, make sure. Yeah, that's probably too small, I think, at this point. So like maybe we'll say 0.4. That looks better. Okay. And we'll return it back to the ground. And we'll call this group the debris group. Okay, so what I want to do now is grab my particles. I want to grab all of my pieces of geometry, and then I want to come over to my particles, and I'm going to create an instancer, which means all of these particles will use the geometry of this sphere as its shape. So I'm going to click on it. The particle instancer name will be debris chunks, and we will say that the instanced objects will be everything here in this list aside from the particles itself. And we will hit create. Now, if I hide my original geometry, but play through, we need to remove that. There we go. That was why we suddenly had a billion particles. All right, so we've got these little chunks, but right now they're all the exact same thing. So what I need to do now is come over to my particle shape, and let's go to a constant lifespan of how fast do they fall out? We'll say 1.5 seconds. By 1.5, they're gone. Or actually, in these cases, let's go ahead and say 3 seconds, because what we're going to do is collide these with the floor just in case. And I'm going to come over to my instancer here, and I'm going to go to my object index, and I'm going to go to particle ID. So now when they come out, we should be getting a lot of those different shapes happening. And I think I was wrong before. I think these actually do need to be smaller, so I'm going to go back to 0.2 on everything. There we go. Nice small little pieces. So let's go ahead and take a look at that in a play blast. Okay, now that those particles are looking pretty good, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab my two geometry objects, and I'm going to hit make collide on them. And the resistance, or the resilience, will go down to maybe 0.2 and a friction of 0.2. And I'll hit create. There we go. Now they actually will hit the floor instead of just falling through it. So that way we just might get a nice little bit of extra detail there for free. And now that we have that set up, we need to create another emitter. And this one's going to be for all of the really small particles. So I'm going to create the emitter again, and it's going to be very similar. It's going to be volume. It's going to move in the Z direction. Give it some randomness in the speed. I'm going to change it to another sphere. And away from center, 10. Directional speed of 10. And I'm going to shrink this one down to 0.2 as well. And this one we will call the emitter smolder breeze. And here at the third frame, we'll go with maybe 3,000 particles. We can always change that later if we need to. And we'll go down to 0 there. We'll set our key. And let's go ahead and get it into position. I'm going to grab it. I'm going to bring it into alignment with our first emitter. All right, so let's go ahead and come into our dynamic relationships. In the relationship editors, we're going to go to our dynamic relationships, our gravity field. Let's go ahead and see that in our main view. And what we want these ones to have a little more hang time than the first ones did. And also I think we're going to want quite a bit more. So let's go ahead and go up to 6,000. So we'll go to 6,000. That looks like it might be enough. And we'll go ahead and increase their speed a little bit. Maybe away from center more than the directional speed. I don't want them to fly out. There we go. That looks more interesting. And now let's go ahead, since we're here, we'll grab our particle, we'll grab the wall and floor, and we will say make collide again. There we go. And we'll come into our particle shape, and we will turn it into a constant here of our 3 seconds. And let's go ahead, highlight our 2 particles, and we'll do another play blast. Increase that to 1, and we'll do the play blast. Nice, that's looking really good. So let's go ahead and grab our particles for the small debris. And we're going to change the render attributes. And we're going to change them from points to tubes. And as you can see, originally the tubes are going to come in really big. So what we want to do is drop some radius down here. Maybe 0.5 and 0.1. Let's just start here. They're going to definitely go smaller than that. Maybe 0.1 and 0.05. And the trail size, even smaller than that, maybe 0.25. Just enough to make these little teeny chunks. There we go. That looks pretty good. Maybe 0.05, 0.025. There we go. Nice tiny little guys. That's why we want a lot of them, because they're going to be very small. Okay, so we've got our two particle systems set up, and we're going to need just one more now. And this one's going to be a little different, because this is going to be the particle system that's going to drive our fume effects. So we're going to create one more emitter, and we're going to call this the emitter for FumeFX. And once again, we're going to come in here to volume. We're going to come to Z direction. Go ahead and randomize the speed a little bit. Change it to a sphere. And away from center, maybe 5. And directional will be about 5. And we'll go down to 0.2, 0.2, and 0.2. If nothing else this week, we're going to learn how to set up some emitters. And hopefully repeating this process over and over again helps you do that. So let's go ahead and see how these guys go. So we're definitely going to need more speed on our particles, and really more in the directional speed. We want this to shoot out a bit more. And we'll say at 5 frames, we'll cap this at maybe 250 particles. At the 6th frame, we'll turn it right back off. We'll set a key there. And definitely, actually, we're going to want quite a bit more than that. So let's go to 2000. We want to have enough that we can really set a nice fume effect here. So let's go ahead and add a secondary turbulence here to our new particle set. And we're going to go ahead, hit turbulence, and we're going to go up to maybe 50 with no attenuation. And you know what I think I want to do? I want to come over to my first frame, drop this down. So I'd like it to build out. There we go. That's a little better. And on their lifespan, these ones are going to be very short particles. They're not going to last very long, because we're going to let FumeFX take over. So we're going to come into their lifespan. We'll go to a random range of maybe 0.5 and 0.5. So they're not going to live very long at all. And maybe even shorter than that. Let's go to 3.5 and 3.5. And let's go ahead while we're here, and let's increase the amount of particles, because I'd still like to see more of them. There we go. Nice little burst. And so now that we have our FumeFX particles, I'm going to come in here and create a FumeFX volume. And this volume does not have to be anywhere near as big as it normally does. So let's go ahead and drop it just in half immediately. We'll bring it out. And we'll line this up pretty close to the wall here. We'd like the wall and the floor of the FumeFX volume to actually be our collision objects for our FumeFX smoke. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say that in my blocking sides, I'm going to say Z both sides and Y both sides. That way they'll block out anything that's coming off of there. So with my particles highlighted here, I'm now going to come in and I'm going to grab a create particle source, and then I'm going to come over to my FumeFX, open up the relationship manager, and I'm going to add in my particle source. So now we can have some particles driving our fume. So now in the particle source, I'm just going to drop down my icon size. I always think it's too big. I'm going to want to see these guys in the viewport. Let's go ahead and generate them out. We can see they're very, very big right now. So let's go ahead, drop these down to maybe a 0.4 or 0.5. There we go. And we'll come down to our fuel and we're going to disable it. And I think everything else should be okay here for the moment. Then we'll come back to our FumeFX regular and we'll just get this guy set up. So our output is ending on frame 72. Our playback is on frame 72. That's perfect. The reduce, well, for right now, I'll just turn that down to 5. And then take my maximum iterations down to 80. Time scale's good. I want to make sure my viewport update is every frame. And I'm going to add in some turbulence. And just like what we normally do with the explosions, we're going to go ahead and have a pretty high turbulence to start, but very quickly we'll go down to something very reasonable. We just want to really churn this up. And the scale on the turbulence, we want nice small scale with a lot of detail. Come over to our fuel, we'll turn off simulate fuel. Our smoke buoyancy, well, we'll see where that's at in a moment. I do know we're going to want this to diffuse pretty fast, so I'm going to come up here to 1 and 10 immediately. So we want the big puff of smoke, then we want that puff of smoke to disappear. And let's go ahead, we'll save, and we'll simulate, just to see what we've got going on. And we've got giant, giant voxels. And that's because our spacing is incredibly low right now. Let's go down to 0.2, or maybe 0.1. There we go. That's a decent starting size. And we'll hit start on it. And I can already tell that this is a lot of smoke. We're getting a ton of smoke here. Way more than we actually need. So some ways we can deal with that is we're going to kill off the particles faster. So let's go down to maybe 0.1 and 0.1 for our lifespan there. And then we'll come back to fume. And in our smoke, we're going to turn up this dissipation quite a bit. And we'll go ahead and preview it again. And let's go ahead and stop that. It's diffusing pretty fast. I like the speed it's diffusing, but I think we've added just far too much turbulence in the beginning here. So let's go ahead and drop that down to 1. We'll set that key, and let's look at it one more time. That's looking pretty good, I think, as far as the speed of it goes. Go ahead and stop that. I'm going to bring back up my viewport and see if, there we go. Now it's starting to show in the viewport. And there might still be just a little bit too much turbulence, but overall I'm liking this. I think this works pretty well. Let's go down to maybe a 0.7. We'll set that key. And let's go ahead and turn on wavelet turbulence as our extra detail, because I think we're definitely going to want that. And it looks like it dies out pretty fast, which we want. So we're not going to need all 72 frames for this. So I'm going to drop that in half, and my output's going to go down to 36, and my playback's going to go down to 36. I think by then we will have lost it all. And I'm going to go ahead and hit simulate one more time. That's looking better. I think it might be rising up too fast. So to fix that, I'm going to come into my particle source. I'm going to come down to my temperature and maybe go to 100. Just don't need it to be quite that hot. Let me come back to Fume, simulate it again. Alright, so that was a pretty quick simulation. We only did those 30 frames. Let me go ahead and bring up my preview, and we'll just kind of scrub through here. That looks pretty nice, but we're definitely going to want to add some more detail to it. So we have it set to simulate to wavelet turbulence, but to do that we need to come over and set our sim mode to wavelet, keep our cache at default, and then we want to come down to our wavelet, and in the extra detail we don't need fire and we don't need fuel, we just want to do the smoke. And we'll go ahead and go by 2. That should give us plenty of really nice detail. So I'm going to go ahead, actually keep my preview window open, save my scene, and I'm going to simulate it again with wavelet turbulence. This is going to take a bit longer to get fully simulated, but the results are really going to be worth it. So I'm going to go ahead, start my simulation, and we'll be back as soon as we can. Okay, and we're back, so let's go ahead and just play through. That's looking really, really nice. But the last thing I want to do before I leave Fume is I want to come down, and we're going to do a post-process on this as well. I want to minimize the grid. I'm going to exclude fire. I'm going to exclude... I want to keep everything. Yeah, everything else I'll keep. So now we're going to set our cache over to wavelet, and we're going to set our sim mode to post. We're going to sim it one more time. And what this is going to do is get rid of all the voxels we're not using. This is going to help speed up preview times, and it's going to help speed up render times. So this is the final step in a wavelet simulation. You want to simulate your default. If you're going to do extra detail, then you simulate either your extra detail as a texture or as wavelet turbulence. And then the final step here is do a little post-processing to help clean up the simulation before you render it. Okay, and we've done our post-process. So we're going to switch our cache over to the post. And now if we cycle through here, we've got really nicely high detailed smoke, and we've got reduced file sizes, which is always great. So the smoke itself, I want to come down to its render settings really quick. Turn off fire. And I just want to change the smoke from being a pure white the whole time over to something a little darker. I think overall a heavy white is okay. I just don't want it to be pure white. Okay, so now we've got that set up. And now that we've got so many more voxels, I just want to jump up here to my reduce and maybe go to about 15. Yeah, there we go. Just make sure that the viewport isn't getting completely choked. All right, so we're looking pretty good here. We need to set up a couple lights now and start dealing with our render settings. So let's go ahead and back out a little bit and in all the viewports. And I'm going to create a spotlight, and I'm going to go ahead and look through it, back off, make sure that it's broad enough that it's going to cover the entire area. And I'll go ahead and increase my cone angle to help with that. And I'm going to come down to the color, and we can see there's a bit of a blue light coming in over here. So let's go ahead and just give it a little bit of a blue tint on this one. And it's not very, very strong, so maybe we'll say it's 0.5. And then we'll go ahead, duplicate that light, and now let's look through that. We'll come over to this side where we can see there is a white light coming in, or a whiter light. It's got a little bit of orange to it, but just a little bit. It's pretty close to pure white. And we'll go ahead and we'll make that our key light. And we may only need those two lights. I'm going to go ahead and pick a good frame here in the middle. I'm going to save, and I'm going to open up my render settings really quick. And right now we're only going to be want to really deal with a little bit. We're not going to have everything fully shaded, which is fine. I just want to make sure that our lighting is okay. And now what I want to do is let's go ahead and while we're here, let's start shading some things. We'll go open up the hypershade, and first thing I need to do is just create a new blend material, and I'm going to come down to its matte opacity. I'm going to change it to a black hole, and I'm going to call this the matte material. And I'll go ahead and grab my floor and grab my wall, and I'm going to assign the matte material to those. And let's just render that real quick, make sure that was working correctly. There we go. Now we can see that there's nothing there. The only reason we have something here is because we still have our image showing, which is fine. And we're going to come back here now, and let's go ahead and get rid of that image in our render view. So we'll grab our camera, come over to the image plane, and for now we'll just turn that off so we can just deal with this stuff we got to deal with. Come over to FumeFX, we'll add in our two lights so that our smoke will go ahead and take the light, and let's turn that to always display in the viewport now, so even if I click off of it, I'll still get my smoke preview. Let's take a render there. And one more, and I don't think we're getting, oh, we're in Maya software. I am sorry. I was wondering why my FumeFX wasn't showing up. It's because we're using the wrong renderer. Okay, so we definitely have to go in and shade our particles because yellow and blue isn't going to really work for us. So for our small debris particles, we'll just come in here and we're going to grab our particle cloud shader, and I just want to bring this over into kind of the reality of what that wall is, which is kind of an off-white. Something like that. We'll turn down its transparency, and That should be okay for that. We'll check on it in a moment. And then for the wall chunks, we'll just grab our new Lambert. And we'll call this chunks. Did I not create the new Lambert? There we go. And we'll call this chunks shader. And again, same thing, we're going to just want to come in and give it something of an off-white color. Just enough. And then we're going to take all of our shards here from that sphere. We'll right-click and assign the materials. Now if we take a look at our render, okay, that's looking pretty good. I think we're still too yellow here in our small particles. So let's come back here and we'll just lighten that up a bit, keep that closer to white. And let's go ahead, save that frame and render another right on top of it. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, just for fun, because I don't think I'm actually going to render this way, I'm going to come over here to my quality and I'm going to turn on motion blur. I just want to see what this is going to look like. Yeah, well, that's not such a bad render. You know, the render time is much, much higher. And they're so streaky that I'm not sure how that's going to look in the composite. I don't think we want to see that much motion blur on this. So better to leave it to the composite, so we'll just turn motion blur back off. And I think that one's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and play it through. I just want to see, I don't think we're going to need to render 72 frames here. I think at about 36 there is where it started really moving. Nothing else is still jumping around. So let's go ahead and just jump this down to 36. That definitely is going to give us enough time. And we're pretty much ready on the first camera. But now I need to create a second camera. And I want to go ahead, come down to its environment, and I'm going to put our shot 12 into this one. And I'm going to have it through my camera only in RGB, and I'm going to switch over to that camera now. I'm just going to back up here. And I want to line this guy up a little more with our new shot. So tilt it down. I'm going to need to zoom in a bit. And the nice thing is, because we already did our height correctly, as soon as we get this lined up, this should be the right level for this render as well. So let me go ahead and play through this one. That's pretty good. Zoom out a little bit. It's the top of the wall we can actually see there. So let's get that lined up correctly. There we go. All right. So we can turn that guy back off. And let's rename our cameras now that there's more than one of them. And we'll call this cam shot 11 is camera 1, and cam shot 12 is our second camera. All right, so now let's open up our render settings for real. And I'm going to go ahead and render out my IFF. And I'm going to use my scene name and my camera name. and do the camera name one more time. There we go. So we'll have a folder called shots 11 and 12. In there we'll have shot 11 with shot 11 files, and then shot 12 with shot 12 files. And just using the %S for the scenes and %C for cameras. And there are more of those, I just forget what they are at this moment. We're going to need a animation sequence, frame padding at 4, that's fine. So we'll go frame 1 to 36. And we're going to add a second camera, so we'll have shot 11 and 12. And I think instead of 1920 1080, I'm just going to go with 2K just so I have a little wiggle room if I need it. And that should set up our render here. So I'll save my file, and I will open up my script editor, switch over to rendering, and I will go ahead and batch render. Now, normally this is where I would say render time and rendering sucks and things like that. But we got some other stuff to do that we can prep while this renders. So let's go back to After Effects real quick and take a look. Now, even if we have those little puffs of debris and smoke coming off the wall, it's going to look really silly if there's nothing on the wall after that. So we're going to need some bullet holes for the wall. And I think what I'm going to do is come over here to Photoshop, and I've got a little file with just a ton of little bullet holes in them. And if I look at it, you know, we just have lots and lots of nice little bullet holes. So what I'm going to do is create a little bullet hole piece of art. And I'm going to make a new Photoshop document at 1920 by 1080. And I'll go ahead and grab some bullet holes here. There we go. I'll just start dropping them in. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Come on. 9, and there we go, 10. That should be plenty. So I don't need that anymore. And now I can just come in here and kind of start arranging these guys. And I don't want them to be completely linearly even. It should look a little messy because you've got an automatic weapon firing, so there's a lot of recoil, a lot of jitter to it. So some of these things will be closer than others. We'll just kind of line them all up here until we have a nice little spray pattern. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and group these guys. And then I'm going to shrink them down a little bit, because now I'm going to take them, duplicate the group. I'm going to rotate it over. I'm just going to double the amount of bullets I got happening here. There we go. Nice large spray pattern of bullets. Generally in a straight line, but definitely more interesting to look at. And let's go ahead and shrink this down a little bit more, because what we want to do next is create a new layer, and I want some cracks for the wall. And the way I am going to make these cracks is I'm going to use a brush that has a crack pattern to it. And I got my brushes here at Brush Easy, which you can go to at brusheasy.com, and I just looked up cracked, and it sent me to a pop-up. Now I looked up cracked, and you can see here there's just a lot of really nice wall crack brushes that you can use. And they're mostly free. There are some that you'll have to pay for, but overall, there have been some very kind artists out there who have given away nice brushes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my crack brushes here. I'm going to drop it down in size a little bit because that was a little big for its starting size. Oops, too small. Only got to 20 there. There, 200. That should look pretty good. Lost my layer. There we go. So now I can come in and just kind of start bringing in some damage to the wall. I'm just going to kind of try different brushes here. I can always erase stuff later if I don't like it. And just kind of make some really messed up parts of the wall that can look like the bullets were splintering the plaster. Something like that, and maybe a nice one across here. No, I don't like that one. That one's a little too specific. That one's not bad, but I'm gonna, oh. There we go. And I'm gonna shrink it and rotate it a bit. So that'd be a nice connector here. Maybe nice long hairline fracture-y one. And maybe just some more fine cracks for some more fill in. There we go. Now I'll go ahead and merge these two, and I'll drop it below my bullet hits themselves. We can get rid of that background. And now I can save this as bullet holes. Wall. And I'll go ahead, close out of Photoshop, and I will come over here, and while that's still rendering, there's a little more I can do, which is we need to be tracking this wall here, and we've got a pretty good point of reference right up there, so I'm going to come here, create a new null, call this the tracker, and I will double click on my footage to go into the layer window, and I will go to my window, open up the tracker, and I'll track motion, and I'll get myself a bit of a bigger area here to look at. There we go. Bring this right up here to that corner, right to where that black and white really meet. There we go. Okay, and I'll just go ahead and track through that. and I'll go ahead and apply it. And I'll hit OK. Now, if I come back here to the beginning, let's see, how's our render doing? All right, already at frame 10. Not so bad. So a third of the way through. But the system is getting pretty compromised. It's getting pretty hard. And the next couple things I do, I'd really like to have some fine control. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here, let the render finish, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're back here in After Effects now. We've got our two shots for shot 11 and shot 12. And we had been working with our shot here in After Effects. We got it tracked, but we're definitely going to need to do some roto here, because if we just lay our shot in and attach it to the tracker, that's going to work fine, but it's, you know, going in front of Amber and in front of the table. So I'm going to do an Amber roto, and I'm going to do a table roto. And we'll pop these in front. And the Amber roto, I'm going to use the roto brush for this, because her shape is pretty well defined. I think it'll do a pretty good job of grabbing her. Let's just clean this up a little bit. I'm not terribly concerned if we grab some of the table on this roto, because we are going to roto the table as well. So let's start stepping through, and we'll just kind of clean up as necessary. And we'll just use the Alt key to remove the areas we don't want anymore. Get in there in between her arm, but we want to keep the dress. And fortunately, this is a nice short shot, so it shouldn't be too much. But we definitely want to come back here, went the wrong way, make sure we keep the gun. So I'm going to use the Control key, change the size of my brush, come in here and just grab that gun shape. And let's make sure we don't overdo it there. Knock all of this out. Okay, now I'm going to jump back to my first frame, and because we've got hair to deal with here, I'm going to grab the refine edge, and again hitting Control, size up my brush, and just kind of go around Amber's outline here. And that looks pretty clean to me, but we'll just step through again. Make sure we don't grab anything we don't want. All right, and let's freeze it. So we'll come back here and we'll just check it. Since we have that one piece in, let me turn off the table roto, and you can see we got a really nice roto on Amber. But we still have to deal with that table, and there's a little bit of a trick that I like to use for doing a object like this in a scene that's tracked. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a matte layer, and I'm going to put it down here underneath the Amber roto. I'm going to turn its opacity down so I can see the table underneath. And then I'm just going to come in with my Roto Bezier on, and I'm going to outline this table here on the last frame. Okay, now what we can do is we can take our masks here, and we'll set a keyframe here at the end, and then we're going to hook up that layer to the tracker. And because there's not a lot of perspective shift, we should be able to get pretty close. So now all I have to do is adjust just a little bit. So I'll come over here and I'll adjust the chair with the shirt. Make sure that's on there. Adjust the table here. I'll adjust the chair. Adjust this part of the table. That guy up. Bring up our bottom of the chair, or bottom of the table, excuse me. It's all just lined back up. And we're going to have a really nice roto pass here with very minimal effort. So now, if I come back here and just kind of cycle through, we should be holding pretty darn close. That does look pretty good. So now all I have to do is turn my opacity back up on the mat, and then use the alpha mat here. And let's go ahead and look at it with our one blast in there. There we go, falling right behind the chairs and the table and behind Amber. All right, so let's get this shot where we need it to go. So we've made that wall, bullet hole wall and crack graphic, and we'll just grab that off of the desktop here. And I'll go ahead and bring it as a piece of footage, and I'll drop it just underneath here, and I'm going to scale it down until I feel it's about the right size. Probably a little easier to see once it's over here. There we go. And I'll attach that to my tracker, and let's see all this together. There we go. That's getting there. But we need to do a little color correction here because our bullet holes are probably a little bit off more than we'd like. So I also want them just to be a little bit smaller. Maybe at 23. There we go. So there they are. And we'll grab a curves adjustment. And I'll come in and check out my red channel. Switch my curves to red, and I'll just bring these down until they start matching. Same with my greens. Darken those up just a little bit. And my blue channel doesn't have quite as far to go, I think. Or maybe, no, about the same as the green. Oh, I grabbed the wrong channel there. Blue, there we go. There we go. Okay, so now if I go back to my RGB, they should be matched in a bit better. Looks like there's still a little too much red in them. Let's pull that down. There we go. That's looking really nice. And the next thing I need to do is add some blur to it. So the first thing we'll add is a little bit of motion blur here. And then we'll just grab a fast blur, drop it on top, and just tune it down until we've got something that matches about the blur level of the image. And that looks about right. So if we play through, we got some really nice holes in the wall here. And let's turn off our bullet hit. And we'll go ahead and right about here where we start seeing the gun again, we'll have these last couple holes appear. So I'll grab my mask tool and I'll just come in and set a keyframe about to there. It'll be all the way over. There we go. That adds those last few in. And let's line up our bullet hits. So right here, that first one starts becoming visible. So we'll turn on our wall hit and we'll have it start right there. And then we'll make or before we make a copy, let's go ahead and get this guy into shape. So we'll need to just color correct here. And this one, I think we might be able to just pull it down a little. A little bit like that. Let's grab a little motion blur. Throw it over the top, maybe 12 or 16 samples will probably do well. Let's see how that one looks. And it might be a little bit big for what we're doing here, so let's go ahead, maybe go down to 80%. All right, so we got that one. Let's duplicate it. Bring over the next one, duplicate it, and we got our last one here. So, boom, 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 just like that. Now, I'm going to add a couple extra here from before our back is turned, just to give us a little bit more action here. We want to see a little bit of the fallout from some of these other blasts. So maybe there, and one more over in this area here, just so we can see kind of more of the range of destruction that's been happening. That one, and we'll move over that one. There we go, that's starting to look like something. That's looking pretty sharp. Let's go ahead and grab an element out of the Action Essentials pack, and we'll grab this muzzle flash. And again, we'll come here to where we see the gun. That's about where we'll start our firing. And let's make it a 3D layer. We'll scale it down quite a bit and we'll rotate it until we start matching up a little bit with our angle. Something more like that. And what we'll do is set a position here. And we'll just follow that gun tip for a few frames. There we go. But that muzzle flash doesn't look great yet. So what I want to do is screen it over the top, and then I'm going to add a glow to it. And I'm going to come down to my A and B colors here, and I'll go with really bright yellow and bright orange. That should do. I'll scale out the width of the radius. Just bring that up. Get that glow intensity a little bit. There we go. That's looking better. Let's run through that. Not bad. Definitely getting there. So I think what I'd like to do now is throw on a little bit of camera shake and see if we need to do anything else with this one. So I'm going to use my PB Real Camera Shake, and this is the same plugin I've shown a few times, and this one is free on our website at pixelbump.com. And I'm going to go with a camera shake at maybe a 2x, and I'm going to click Create the Control Null, and then I'm going to grab everything here, let's see, with the exception of the things already linked to the tracker, and I'm going to link them all up. Maybe I'll go with a 0.5 and a 0.5, and I'll scale this up so that we don't lose the edges, which I don't think we're going to. That's pretty good. And let's go ahead and turn on our motion blur for everybody, and we'll take a preview. And that's looking pretty sharp. That's starting to look like we've got a very angry woman with a machine gun blowing a hole through the wall. And I think that shot's looking great. So let's go ahead and tackle shot 12. And shot 12, there's going to be a little bit of a difference in our workflow. And that's because we need to track something here for our wall hit, but we have a lot of motion here on the walls, and if we just try to use our regular tracker and set this in 3D space, it's going to get really wonky really fast. So let's take care of the first track. And we'll go ahead, click in, and we'll hit track motion. We'll bring up the size of our search area. I'll just grab right here in the door frame again. That looks like it held pretty well. I'll apply it. And again, now I can go ahead and put some wall hits behind Eric. So if I grab this wall hit and I bring it up here, it can be behind him. And I can put one in front of him, no problem. Those both will go in. But like I said, if I bring in my bullet holes and I make it a 3D layer and I rotate it in and bring it over, scale it down, just for argument's sake, we'll get it in there and we'll attach it to the tracker. Well, you can see it's wiggling against the wall, and that's because we're dealing with 3D positional data. And I don't want to do a 3D track in this area. We don't need to. What I'm going to do instead, let's go ahead and reset our bullet holes here. What we'll do instead is we're going to go over to Mocha. And I'm going to create a new project, and I go to my shot 12 folder. There we go. Now it sees the frame range, and we're good. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create a mask around Eric to tell Mocha to ignore this area for its final tracking. So I'm just going to come down here and create a mask around him. There we go, and we'll call this the Eric layer. And we don't need shear. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the minimum pixels. And we'll just kind of frame by frame this because I think it's going to get off pretty quick. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll hold pretty well. Yeah, looks like it's actually doing a good job. which is great. So let's go ahead and let it just finish on its own. Oh, see there at the bottom, it's losing his arm a little bit, but that's okay. We can come back here and adjust, and then we'll go frame by frame again for a little bit. Make sure we don't lose too much. There we go. Definitely bring that in. And here at the end, we'll just make sure we're tighter. Okay, so now we've got Eric with a spline mask around him. So we'll turn off its tracking and we'll lock the layer. Now we'll come in and grab an area here on the wall that will hopefully be trackable by Mocha. So I'll grab that, just come around like this. Just want to make sure there's enough there for it to grab onto. And this one I think we're going to want perspective. Let's try minimum range of 50 again, and we'll slide this layer underneath and call this wall right. And let's go ahead and see how well it can handle it. And I think more or less that looks pretty right on. Well, maybe not. It looks like it is growing there a little bit, so we may want to turn that perspective off and try it again. And let's see. That looks pretty good. Let's bring in our grid and set an area here so we can watch it a little closer. You just kind of want to line this up pretty close to what the wall's perspective is. So this will give us a really good idea of what we're doing. And that's not bad. I think I'll increase my minimum pixels, and I'm just going to go ahead and track it one more time. See if I can get it just a little bit tighter. And let's come back. All right, so that one's pretty good. We'll turn it off, we'll lock it down, and we'll create one more spline on this side. Go ahead and create our perspective. So we've lined up. That's about right. And again, let's just go ahead, go to 60, and we'll try tracking it. This one looks like it's holding pretty nice. There we go. All right, out of the box, we've got it. Now we do have a little bit of, actually, let's drop that back to the bottom there. I'm gonna go one more time. I just wanna make sure that none of the Eric motion here is interfering, which it might have been. But that did look pretty good. I don't think we really had any interference there. There we go. Now we're just sure we don't. So I'll turn that off. I'll lock it. We'll call it wall left. And what we're going to want to do is export the tracking data. And I'm going to use the Red Giant Warp. And this also works for Mocha import. These two things are the best way I've seen to work with data from Mocha. So if you can get one of these two, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And we'll come over here to our tracking folder, and we'll call this one shot 12, and this is the right. And then we'll go over here and we'll export the tracking data, and we'll go shot 12, and this is the left. Okay, so let me save that project just in case we do need to come back. And I'm going to grab my bullet holes here, and I'm going to put my red I'm going to put my red giant corner pin on top of it. And I'm going to come to the Mocha import, and I'm going to load to pins. And I'm going to go to my projects, tracking, and I'm going to grab the right wall. And there we go. Now it's in on the wall. Now the great thing about this plugin is the ability to fine tune. So now if I need to move this around, if I'm not happy with the placement, if I'm not happy with the scale, which I'm not, I want that to be smaller. I'd like it to move over here a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead, turn on my motion blur for that layer. And we can see it's holding on the wall really, really nicely. And let me go ahead and grab another copy here, and I'm going to go ahead and apply the red giant warp, and I'm going to load to pins again, and I'll choose the left wall, and in the Y I'm going to reverse it so these two match, and then maybe I'll go down to 0.8 and negative 0.8. There we go. And I'll slide it around a little bit until I find a space that I think looks like it would go from this wall to that wall. There we go. And let's go ahead and turn on our motion blur on that layer. Not bad at all. I think they both need to move up a little bit. So let's grab their Y and slide them up. And slide it up, and this one I'm going to rotate just a little bit. So this is why this plugin is so great. It just really allows you to fine-tune your placement after the track. There we go. All right, so let's go in and do some of our standard stuff here. Let's color correct, and we'll just go into our red channel, bring it down, and our green channel, bring that down, and the blue, bring that down. All right, so let me copy that. Looks pretty good. We'll paste it onto the other side, and again, let's go ahead and give this a little extra blur. Until it starts matching that wall again. There we go. Something like maybe, is 3 too much? Maybe 2. Yeah. All right, so we'll go with 2. And I'll copy that over to the other wall. And now we can start really looking at our hits here. So I'm going to grab this one behind him. I'm going to make sure it's already fairly exploded. And I'm going to put on the pixel motion blur. There we go. Again, we'll add it up to 16. Let's throw some curves on it. I think we just want to darken it just a little bit. Bring down its brights. There we go, something around there. Let's see. There we go. Okay, So we've got this first one, and what we can do for that right now is just grab it and paste that onto the one up here for later. Let's go ahead and duplicate this one a few times. So that way we've got a pretty heavy amount of destruction happening here throughout this entire shot. Something about like that, maybe. Maybe I'll do one more back here. And let's see what we've got. And I think that one's not going to be in the back. I think that one's in front here. So let's go ahead and move some of these guys back. That one to there. Let's duplicate this one. And there we go. There we go, that's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and create, let's see which side is which. There we go. So this is bullet holes. Right. And this is bullet holes left. This is why naming things is so helpful, so you don't have to keep clicking layers off and on. And we'll create a matte for it. And we'll call this matte right. And we'll just give this an alpha matte here. And let's go ahead and soften our matte here using a little bit of feathering. Nothing too crazy, and I'll bring it in just so. 25 there. Okay, so now I can just follow along. And this one? Yeah, that one's way off. So we'll go there. With our position on the layer. And about here, we want our position to be all the way over. And I think our last one gets a little too far off, which means I probably need to knock everybody over just a little bit. Go. There we go, that's looking pretty good. And let's go ahead and create some for the other side. Oh, have I been working this whole time without anything hooked up to the tracker? That's why I keep having to readjust these guys. Silly me. There we go. Okay, so now let's just readjust a little bit here. Make sure everybody's where they should be. Grab this one back here. And this one goes over there. This one should be up here. And this one should be up here as well. Okay. All right. And these bullet holes should all be underneath. There we go. There we go. That's looking pretty good. So we've got some of it going in front, some of it going in back. I think we have a little too much down here, but you know what? I think I actually want to scale these guys up a little bit anyway. Just want them to feel a little bigger and more dangerous. So just go ahead and fix that since we're here, and we can. It's the good thing about doing all this stuff digitally is always go back and fix things. I'm gonna pop this one on top as well. I think that'll look better. There we go. Yeah, that looks much nicer. I like that. All right, so now we can head over to the other side. And we've already kind of got things in order. So let's go ahead and take our first set here and let's make these guys green. So we'll be able to visually identify which is right and which is left. So now we've got this side, and we need to have a matte layer for this side as well. But our position is going to need to change. And we'll just go alpha matte this side. There we go. And where does our alpha matte finish moving here? There we go. All right. So now those two should go in sync with each other. There we go. Nice. And we'll take our first one and we'll just offset it a little bit the other way because we want this one we want to make sure that we've got a little bit of offset happening here. Do I have that not scaled properly? I do not. There we go. Now we're on the right side here. So that goes like that. And a little bit here. And one more maybe just from here. And we'll go ahead and duplicate here. And we'll offset its scale again, turn that back around. Let's change its color over to a darker blue so we can see it. And we'll have this one hit maybe 2 frames before. So that way it hits this wall, then hits that wall in rapid succession. Just so we can feel more of a cause and effect happening. Go. And let's see this all run together. There we go. That's looking pretty good. We've got some nice debris falling all around Eric, in front of and behind him. The hits look pretty darn good. I think the only thing I don't like about those bullet holes is how dark they are. I think I'm going to come here and just grab an exposure. And I'll just brighten them up just a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now, The only thing I really would want to add on top of this is a little bit of smoke. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and grab something out of the Action Essentials pack from Video Copilot, and I'll drop this all the way to the top. And let's just offset a little bit. And I will attach it to the tracker. And I'm going to try soft light, pretty good. Let's scale it up so it can stay in frame the whole time. Oh, still needs to be a little bit bigger than that. Let's try 125. And let's go ahead and reverse it. I think it would look better if the smoke is more on that side. There we go. All right, that's looking pretty good. And even though this has a bit of camera shake, actually let me go ahead and turn on my motion blur for everybody before I add more camera shake, just to make sure that I'm not going to overdo it. Yeah, I think I'm going to add the camera shake. So I'm actually going to just pre-comp this guy. I'm going to call this shot 12 working. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up my camera shake again. And we'll choose a different camera shake. We'll create the control null. And we'll attach. And then we're going to go maybe 110. And 0.6. I'd like this one to be a little shakier, but we'll see. And we definitely lost the bottom here a bit towards the end. So go up to 115, see if that solves it. There we go. And that looks like a pretty hectic day at home. So I think we've come to the end of this tutorial, and I hope you've learned something that you can use in your work. If you have any questions, you can ask them on Twitter or Facebook or down in the comments. You can go to the website pixelbump.com, watch other tutorials, interviews with working artists, get some of these free tools. Thanks so much for watching. Go and create.